Lieutenant Governor, I'm so happy that you were able to join me here today on Spolitics. One of the many interesting things in your bio, one of the things that stood out to me is that you also are a DAPCEP alum. I
Yeah.
am also a DAPCEP
Look at
alum.
that. Look at
You
that.
look at that. And so for people who are like, what the hell is DAPCEP? It is a pre-engineering program that I think I did this in like seventh or eighth grade, and it's offered in the Detroit area. It was free then,
Hmm.
but I think it's no longer free. I think that was one of the issues that I think you had with it. Is that still
Yeah.
true?
Yeah. So just the DAPCEP means Detroit Area Pre-College Engineering Program.
Because I couldn't remember what it was. I was
I
like,
got you. I
DAPCEP
got
was.
you. And I know that because it's like ingrained. I was like Mr. DAPCEP. My mother participated in the DAPCEP Parent Advisory Committee. Like we were all in on it, and it was incredible for me. I met some of my best friends in DAPCEP classes on Wayne State's campus or on U of D's campus, University of Detroit campus, like all this. So it was important to me, not only academically, but socially, like meeting people who I still rock with today. And yes, it was a free program and it was amazing for kids in Detroit and around the suburbs of Detroit. Because by seventh grade, I actually lived in Farmington. I moved out of the city of Detroit by that time. But everyone could still benefit from it. We used to do these huge things at like King High School in the city or at Cobo Hall. You would come and sign up for your classes. It was really great. But after the financial crisis in 2008, a lot of the companies, DAPCEP was this partnership of like big companies like GM, Ford, Chrysler, all the big automotive suppliers, and all the universities and philanthropy was funding it. And after the financial crisis, a lot of the corporate sponsors pulled out. And so the state of Michigan stepped up, and we fund DAPCEP with state dollars every year, but it's still not enough to make it a free program again.
That's disheartening to hear because, like you, it was the social connections and realized as a journalist, I didn't want any parts of math or science. So, you know what I'm saying? But I do vaguely recall it wasn't my first kiss. It might have been my second or third kiss with a kid with a young man who's in DAPCEP. So Damon, wherever you are, just know that I still remember
That's
that.
hilarious you say that. Actually, not this is not with the DAPCEP commercial because I definitely had my first kiss with a girl named NJ at a
Look at that.
so that's
DAPCEP was like the young people's Tinder before
changing
Tinder.
lives. But can I say one thing about that? Since you said look, as a journalist, you were not trying to hear science and math. I can tell you though, the most important lesson I learned in a DAPCEP class was not a science or math thing though. It was actually a marketing lesson I learned. I took this DAPCEP class where we got to go to the Chrysler headquarters in Auburn Hills, Michigan. And this was right before the PT Cruiser came out, to date myself. And all the kids in the class were like, this car is trash. Like it's ugly. It's like we don't like this. And the guy was taught us about targeted marketing. He was like, y'all don't like it because it's not for y'all. This is marketed to a different set of people. And I just had never understood that. I thought everything was for everybody. But so I learned targeted marketing and that concept, as a ninth grader, in a DEF class.
Oh, wow, look at that. I wish that I was as studious as you and could remember and recall one lesson, but I do know many a Saturday morning at Wayne State University. I think we had to be there like 8
9 to
a.m.
12, 9 to
Oh, no, it
12,
was 9. You're
9
right.
to
Yeah, it was
12.
early, man. And that just felt so brutal. But no, even though like those were not my natural interests, math and science, I was more of an English reading, like creative person. I think the structure as a child did me well,
Yeah.
obviously. And so it was just nice to know that there were other young people who were pursuing academics. So, it was like a very good environment. But not to get heavily to Detroit. We will get to some Detroit stuff later in this podcast. I want to start by asking you a question that I
Yeah.
ask every guest here on Spolitics, and that is, who is the athlete that made you love sports?
Oh my gosh, I love this. So I played basketball growing up. I'm 6 feet 8 inches tall, which you can't tell on the camera here, but I'm 6'8", stand tall from Michigan. Growing up, I played basketball. I played a little bit of soccer. I played baseball up until the first time I saw a curveball, and then it ended my baseball career. Um, but I modeled my game after a combination of Chris Webber and Kevin Garnett. The Fab Five were so important to me as a sports fan. My fifth grade school picture, my grandma somehow bought me an authentic Chris Webber jersey. And so I'm wearing a Chris Webber jersey with this bright yellow turtleneck in my fifth grade school picture. I showed that picture to C Webb. I mean, it was hilarious stuff. But so it was Chris Webber, the Fab Five. That's who made me fall in love with sport, made me fall in love with basketball, made me fall in love with the University of Michigan. And that's who it is. And so him, the C Webb and KG, that's who I model my game on as a kind of 3-4 forward. So that's who it is, hands down.
Yeah, growing up, sports seemed to play a pretty integral part of your life. Like you were in Detroit PAL, I was too. PAL being the Police Athletic League. I think other cities have something similar, if not the name PAL itself. So having all of that experience as a youth athlete, how do you think that helped you formulate your leadership style?
Yeah, I think I always played team sports. So I never played an individual sport like tennis or golf or anything like that. So team sport, you learn that you are dependent upon other people for your success. You learn accountability, that somebody can I can make the best pass, but the person has to catch it and score, and vice versa. They can set me up, but I still got to make the bucket. I still have to guard my man. I still have to secure the rebound. So accountability is something that I learned in team sports, but also understanding like how to lose, right, and how to make sure you can lose and learn from it. So I think about those things every day. When accountability, I'm accountable to 10 million people in the state of Michigan every single day, and I'm accountable to our team. My teammate, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, my team who works on Team LG here in the state of Michigan. But there are things that I'm responsible for uniquely that I have to take care of, and I learned what that felt like as a team sport athlete, particularly as a young basketball player. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is responsibility and accountability is what I got from team sport.
Now, you have a very unique, non-traditional path into politics, because I think people would assume that you being lieutenant governor, and not just, and that in itself is historic because you're the first black lieutenant governor in Michigan's history. Most people are, they start a certain way and on a certain path into politics. Your way was not that way at all. So share with people, how is it that you went from a finance background and a more technical background to getting into politics?
Yeah, this was not the plan. Let me just say that. As we talked about, I was exposed to engineering as a kid through
Right.
the Detroit Area Pre-College Engineering Program, DAPCEP. And so, my grandma, I'll go back to even further than that. My grandma, who was a social studies teacher in Detroit Public Schools at Munger Middle School for the Detroit heads on the west side out there, she bought me a computer when I was 5 years old. She somehow figured out that her baby needed to have a computer. So she bought me a computer, and I was the first kid on my block on the east side of Detroit. We lived on the east side, to get a computer. And I fell in love with it. And the thing now that I appreciate as a parent, that my parents did for me as a 5-year-old, is they let the computer be my computer. It wasn't
So you
our
didn't have to share it. It
I
wasn't a
did, yeah,
family
it wasn't
computer.
like now my mother who worked at GM, like, "Oh, I'm gonna do my work at home." Like, it wasn't that. They let it be my computer. And why that's important is because that made me comfortable with technology at a very young age, and comfortable that I could control it. And so I fell in love with computers and technology. That led to my first job when I was 14. I actually learned how to build computers from a guy who was a PC tech working with my mother at General Motors, who had a side hustle building computers. And so he taught me how to build computers in his living room in his apartment in Southfield, right across from Northland Mall. And the first 5 that I built with my own hands, I installed at the Butzel Rec Center on the west side of Detroit on Linwood, the one that has the hockey rink. And so I set up their first computer lab and taught people how to use computers at that rec center. And what was cool about that for me is it showed me that technology can give people new experiences. I showed a woman how to write a resume after her kids got older using Word. I showed an older woman how to play solitaire, which really was a way to show you how to use the mouse. And I love that because my grandma taught me how to play solitaire when I was like 6 years old. So, but then I also got a chance to show this little girl the internet for the first time. Her name was April, and we're using this 1998. We're using Alta Vista as the search engine, and we type in tiger in Alta Vista, and the first picture that comes up is the Old English D from my playoff round Tigers wild card against Houston on Tuesday. But then the second thing though was a picture of a tiger, a Bengal tiger, and she asked me if that tiger was at the Detroit Zoo, and I told her that the tiger was in India, and she just like was like, wow, I've never seen anything in India, and so it showed her that like the internet can connect you to places that are far away from you. So I fell in love with technology. I went to University of Michigan, and I was a double engineering major. I majored in computer engineering and computer science. Like I wrote software. I went to Microsoft after college and built software systems. I worked on SharePoint. I started and sold two technology companies in my career. One about a job and internship website in Detroit, and another one that was about making donations to nonprofits via Twitter. So like I'm an entrepreneur in this. But I never thought about connecting my technology skills to politics until Barack Obama ran for president in 2008. And I volunteered on his campaign when I was living out in Seattle. And one of the campaign organizers, actually, when he found out that my job was writing software, he actually put me on the software team for that campaign. And so now, for you get all those text messages from political campaigns asking you for money.
So we have you to blame.
Yeah, I was on the front end of that. We were asking people about
Man, y'all be like some bill collectors, man. Can't
it's
hit them every
effective, okay?
day.
It works. All right, it works.
Goodness.
But I got a chance to contribute to that tech, and that was the first time that it had ever been used for political purposes. And so, again, this is about technology opening up new experiences for people. And so I was so inspired by that and by President Obama that I actually, look, here's the sequence, Jemele. I quit Microsoft on July 3rd. I got married on July 11th. And I'm still married. We celebrate 15 years this summer, my wife Ellen and I.
I was gonna say, and Ellen was cool with you quitting,
It
as they
worked
say,
out.
one of them,
Okay,
one
listen,
of them
it
good
worked out.
jobs.
It worked out.
Right.
My good job, Microsoft. But then we moved to Washington, D.C., and I got trained as a community organizer inspired by President Obama. But I was able to be a community organizer who understood how to use technology to reach even more people, to take that organizing to a scale that wasn't possible in previous generations. And I worked on issues all around the country on economic justice, social justice, racial justice, immigration reform, affordable housing, stopping voter suppression all over the country. And so I was doing that work and living in D.C. My twins were born in D.C., but I wanted to come home, Jemele. I missed home. I felt bad about leaving home. I started a whole organization called Detroit Diaspora for people who were from Detroit but lived in other places, because there's a Detroit community in every city, and connecting people on that. But finally, we went home 10 years ago in 2014, and I actually went home to get out of politics. I went home I took a job in city government, using my technology training and experiences to help people rebuild trust in city government, because people had lost it. We were in the midst of the city's bankruptcy, coming off of all the stuff with Mayor Kilpatrick, that people had lost trust in city services. So I was using my skills to help rebuild that. Not in a political role, but I was like, I made something to help people be able to report potholes and broken streetlights called Improve Detroit. I helped change the way we manage fire hydrants in the city, because there were a lot of broken fire hydrants in our city, which is really dangerous in a city that had the busiest fire department in the country. So I was doing that kind of work, and it wasn't until the 2016 election, when I personally had a bad voting experience, that people encouraged me to run to be the election administrator, and that's how I got into politics.
What was your bad voting experience?
I voted at a library called the Frederick Douglass Library on Grand River and Trumbull in Detroit. And I went there with my little babies. They were, in 2017, they would have been in preschool at the time. And the line was 3 hours long for a small precinct. The voting tabulation, the ballot tabulation machine broke. People didn't know what to do. It's like my kids are late to school. My wife and I are late to work. And it was just, the system failed us. And I think it failed a lot of people in Detroit that year. And what happened in 2016, for folks who don't know, is former President Trump won Michigan by 10,741 votes, a very, very, very narrow margin. And I felt like, and people convinced me that, a better run election in the city of Detroit probably could have led to more people voting in Detroit. And like 11,000 more people, like that's not a high bar. And then the whole trajectory of our country would have been different. So I ended up actually, leaving my job at the city where I was working and stepping into this political realm. I never considered it before. And my wife was like, "No, I think we can do this." And
Mm.
so she put me on her back and carried me that year while I worked every day to try to earn people's respect and support in the city of Detroit for the Detroit City Clerk, a position few people understood. Um, and I came really close, but unfortunately I lost in 2017.
Yeah, but you didn't. I mean, you didn't lose by a lot. You lost by less than 1,500 votes.
I
And you
lost by
were.
1,486. Yes, I remember the number.
Yes, yes. I was like, I'm sure you probably do. And you lost to somebody who, was an incumbent, and you're a relative
Yeah,
unknown. Running for
yeah.
Detroit City Clerk. What did you learn about yourself in running for, actually running for a political office and losing?
I learned a ton. Like, first of all, the thing that's so interesting about the political realm is there are a few other things in life where you put yourself out there that much. Like you literally have to put yourself. I had to go. I went to 17,000 people's houses personally to go on their porch and to talk to them about the election and about voting and introduce myself and everything, and just then things that people will tell you was just blew my mind. So I learned how to be a better listener. I learned that I had to be convinced that people actually wanted to hear my story. And so I had to learn how to communicate more effectively, which starts with listening, but learn how to say, hey, you know what, people, I was worried that people would be scared away by the fact that I was a software person. But I had to learn, and people were like, nah, no, that's different. We want to hear what that means and why is that relevant to what you're trying to do. Like I had to learn how to tell that story. I learned that if people feel like you are trying to do something for the right reason, they will help you. And I think they felt that I was earnest in my attempt to be a public servant. And people stepped up, Jemele, in ways that I am forever indebted to. We had 600 volunteers helping on that campaign. We got donations from every state in the country to help on that campaign. Like it was washed over me in a way that I can't even articulate. And that's why when I lost, the next morning I cried like a baby. Like my wife had to pick me up off the couch, and I apologized to her, like baby, like I tried all this and you had to do all this extra work because I wasn't here for the kids for 8 months and all that stuff, and I lost. I couldn't do it. Like I'm sorry. I apologized to my supporters and everything, but I learned that people that at bottom, like we are unselfish people. Like people want to be part of something that they think is happening for the right reason. And so I was so just it was a life-changing experience for me. Now, after I lost though, I didn't think I was going to run for office again.
I was gonna say, but at that point, how did you feel like your political career was over?
Well, at least I thought it was going to be on hold for a long time. So that was the first time I'd ever run for office, and I thought, okay, I learned a ton. I made a lot of friends. That's how I met Gretchen Whitmer during it, but I didn't think that I was going to turn around and run for office again until maybe sometime later in life. And so I'm like, well, let me go back to civilian life. Let me, get a job and do our thing with our family, and then maybe I'll revisit this. And it was really just God's grace, good luck, great team, and Gretchen Whitmer willing to be creative. That led to her reaching out to me and asking me to consider being her running mate that following year. I was not angling for that. I was not expecting that, but I appreciated the kind of person who she was, and I'll tell you, you know, I have twins who were born on my birthday in 2013. They just turned 11, and
So that means you can never have a birthday celebration to yourself for the rest of your life.
I get 3 birthday celebrations. That's what that means.
Okay, okay, all right. Good answer. Good answer. Good
Okay,
answer.
but I wanted it. My wife didn't think it was good. I wanted it on my birthday. I wanted it. Okay, we can come back to that.
Okay.
But so when I remember when I took my family to meet Governor Whitmer's family, before that we had joined the campaign. My daughter, my twins are boy girls, so my daughter, my oldest daughter, who by the way is 5'6", and I got to get her to do something, but she's 5'6", and so she's pretty reserved around new people. And so when we went to the governor's home and to have dinner with her family, I told her, look, you don't have to like get into a conversation about it, just say hi when people say hi to you. That's all I need, right? Well, we go up to the governor's door. Emily was with me, and so the governor answers the door. She kind of kneels down to talk to her. And at this time, she's 4, okay? Like, she's very young. And she said, hi, I'm Miss Gretchen. And my daughter, Emily, she looks at her, and looks at me, looks at her, looks at me. And my daughter gave her a hug. And at that moment, I was like, this is the move. My daughter, my baby trusts this woman. If she trusts this woman, I can trust this woman. So that was it. I was in.
And kids will let you know.
Kids know stuff.
They know stuff.
Yeah.
They have good instincts and good discernment, and they also don't have a filter. So if they don't like somebody, they will tell them to their face straight up, I don't like you, right?
Right. That's right.
Because kids, they are ruthless. But you said you were completely surprised, but I'm sure there was obviously people that she could have chosen that had a more sort of laid out political path. Why do you think she chose you?
Yeah, I think you're right. 'Cause there were a lot of people who have had more traditional careers in public service and who are very accomplished, very respected in the community. I think part of it was because I think we complement each other really well. I just like we don't have anything in common except for the things that matter. You know what I mean? Like man, woman, black, white, Detroit, Lansing,
Yeah. She went to the
career.
better university. I understand.
Oh, here we go. She went to state. I went to Michigan. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? But she's an attorney. I'm an engineer. Was a career elected official. I'd never been elected. I think that balance made us a really representative team of the state of Michigan. And frankly, Michigan voters hadn't been offered a team that was that representative before. And so I think part of it is like, we share values. We share the values of people and community. But I think the fact that we had so little in common was a strength, so that more people could see themselves in our partnership and that our service would therefore be more reflective of folks. So I think that was a big piece of it. And I think I think she saw that as a newcomer, but that I was willing, I had a good work ethic, and so was committed. And I think people sort of vouched for that. Maybe if she would have asked us, they'd be like, oh yeah, Gilchrist, he was putting in that work, that's the thing. So I think those were some of the components that went into that choice, and I think have served us well as a team since we've been in office now, going on 6 years.
Now, how did it make you feel? Because obviously, it was you were an out of the box choice, and I'm sure you anticipated that there would be some resistance. And in fact, the Republican Party chair at the time said that you were the least qualified candidate for the office of lieutenant governor in the history of Michigan. So, how did you feel about that skepticism, given the fact that you didn't have traditional political experience?
So on that specifically, so he literally apologized to me like 4 months after the election.
Okay, all right.
So
That's
yeah,
good.
that was hilarious when he came up to me. I didn't really know him, but anyway. So I did expect people to have questions, and that's fair, to have the question like, okay, well, who is this guy? Who you picking who just lost an election? Like that don't make sense, right? So I think that's fair. But for me, again, what I learned in my own race for that local election is that I need to be exactly who I am, and to not apologize for that, and to just give people a chance that I'm going to offer myself, and then if that's not the thing that the voters want, then they have the right to make that choice. And so how I was able to handle the skepticism is a lot of it was either based on just a lack of familiarity, or someone being, purposely told something that was not true about me. So I almost didn't hold that against, like a layperson who had that opinion, because that was through no fault of their own. Because why would they have heard of me if you were a voter in Saginaw, Michigan? Why would you have heard of me? And so I just said, this is an opportunity for me to go and meet people where they are and listen to them, and then have me experience them, and then as part of a conversation have them experience me. And I think that's helped me be able to build rapport with people all over Michigan, because I go everywhere. Michigan has 83 counties. I've been to all 83 counties multiple times, sitting with people, and I talk to people off the record. I'm not talking to people with a bunch of TV cameras behind me. Everything is like, I want to hear what's important to you, what's important in your family and your future. And I think I think I earned people's, respect, whether that was, Democrats or Republicans, because they were like, well, I believe him that he actually cares about what I'm saying. And so I handled the skepticism by just being super earnest. Like, okay, yeah, I hear that, but let's still talk. And I think we were able to get past that as a result of it.
Well, anybody who follows you, or especially if they follow you on social media, the one thing, whether people agree with you politically or not, that they can say is that you show up. And certainly, even though we've gotten a chance to know each other, I mean, for you to show up at my father-in-law's fish fry was just wild to me. I was like, he's a lieutenant governor. Don't he got other things to do? But it was, as you see, it was an opportunity to talk to many members in the community. They were there because the fish fry draws a lot of people. But in general, like, you are literally everywhere. Now, as someone who is that close to the ground and commonly hears what are the priorities for voters.
Yeah.
We're recording this podcast. We're less than 40 days from the national election for the presidential election. One of the focuses has been on Black men in particular. Mm-hmm. A lot of them, at least through social media and sometimes in more public places, have expressed a level of discontent with the Democratic Party. Based off what you have seen, what you've heard from voters on the ground, especially Black men, what have been the primary concerns you have heard from them on the ground?
Yeah. Look, the thing that I hear, and whether it's in Michigan, I mean, I went to Milwaukee for the campaign about a month ago and talked to brothers in a lot of different settings in that city. The thing I hear is it's like less about Democrats than it is more about just impatience with the pace of change. Like, look, man, I want more. I need more. We need something. Because we feel like we are trying, we are grinding, and I don't feel like I'm getting enough. I don't feel like I'm making enough progress. And whether that means that's professionally in terms of, I'm trying to build my wealth and it's not coming, and I still feel blocked out of opportunity for any number of reasons. Educationally, frustrations with family and their support they can give for their family, frustration with the criminal legal system, and not feeling like Democrats have done enough on that. I think it's a frustration with the pace of change, because I think, Black men are pretty ambitious. We can't help but be optimistic about the future, because you never heard of Black folks are not nostalgic. Like the past was typically worse for us.
I was about to say, well, we definitely don't want to return. Like we're not trying to make it great again.
Yeah. The MAGA stuff don't make no sense to us, because it's like, my grandma does not want to go back to the 40s. Like, she likes Alabama still because she's from there, but she doesn't want to go back to the 40s Alabama, right? So I think what we have the opportunity to articulate, and what Vice President Harris and Governor Walz are doing, is having the conversation about, listen, I care about what you want in your future, and let's talk about how we get there and what do you need from that. And I think what I hear from brothers is like, I'll give you an example. So I had a conversation with a guy in a barbershop about a month ago, and he said that this guy works on community violence interruption in the community, right? So he's talking about how do we deal with gun violence, in day-to-day gun violence in the city. And he said, look, man, I'm kind of on the fence, because I feel like I've been doing the same thing for all these years, and in terms of voting, and I haven't felt like I've gotten a different level of support. And so in talking with him through that, what I said was, it's at a basic level, brother. Like, look, if you've been doing this work for 15 years, you obviously have a very clear vision of what you want our community to look like. Like, what you want it to feel like for everyone in our community, our boys, to feel like they are invested in, that somebody cares about their future, that somebody values and respects them, that they can be protected, protected in the community rather than unsafe in the community. Like, you have a vision for what that means. And so I think you got to ask yourself, who actually might share that vision in terms of these choices on the presidential candidate, on the campaign? Because, like, I don't think Trump care about them kids who ain't trying to get killed. I don't think he cares about them. I just don't. Whereas, like, I think Vice President Harris, I think she care about them boys, the ones you were with yesterday. I think she would talk to them in a non-condescending way. And if she wouldn't offer them gym shoes, I think she would say, like, hey, look, like, what are you trying to get to? Oh, you got an idea, you want to go back to school, you want to start a business, like, let's figure out how to do that. And I said that this election at bottom is about who's the person that's going to help, how will they play a role in getting you closer to your goal or your vision you want for our community. And I just think the choice on that level just could not be more clear in this election. But we have to go and listen to people to suss that out. We have to go be willing to go and engage with people to tell that story. Say, yeah, you need to go to a fish fry. You need to go to a high school football game. You need to go and meet people where they are to talk to them. And that's important to me in my service. Now, look, I love people, so I will always get energy from being around people. But the reason I love them is because I learned something from them, and that's what we got to be willing to do.
What you said reminded me a lot of what Governor Westmore recently said about black male voters being frustrated with the pace of change and how Trump is the vehicle for the frustration, but not for the solution.
NAACP released a poll on Friday that showed while black Americans overwhelmingly identify as Democrats, over 1/4 of black men under 50 said they would support the Republican candidate in this year's election. Why do you think that younger male black voters are changing their association like this?
I think there's especially for younger black men, there is a frustration. But it's not necessarily frustration with Vice President Harris, and it's not even frustration with the Democratic Party. Frankly, it's a frustration of the pace of progress in America. I think about my state. In my state, when I was inaugurated, we had an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap in the state of Maryland. And that's not because one group was working 8 times harder. That's because of historical policies and circumstances. When I'm the third African-American ever elected governor in the history of the United States. That's not because I'm only the third African-American ever qualified to be a governor. And so I think the thing that we continue to see, and frankly, I think that debate was actually a perfect illustration where for many of us, we grew up being told by our family members, you've got to work 10 times as hard in order to get ahead, in order to get an opportunity. We saw Donald Trump walk on that debate stage uniquely and historically unprepared. And because he thinks he can win on a whim. And so I think the frustration that people feel is real. But I think the thing that we're continuing to push to a lot of voters, particularly African-American voters, is that Donald Trump is a vessel to the skepticism. But what he is not is actually a vehicle for the solution.
Those comments from Westmore were very, very striking. And as I said before the break, that you echoed something similar. So the frustration, though, is that I guess you know this in the political process, it takes a long time sometimes for things to take effect. Like there are things that Reagan did that we're feeling the effects of now. You know what I mean? There are things that happened presidents ago. If you think about the pace and when we really felt mass incarceration, like this is kind of how it goes. So for, black men in particular, another frustration they seem to be having, or at least that's expressed through the vehicle of social media, and I don't know if you've heard the same thing on the ground, is that they kind of feel invisible to the Democratic Party. Even though you're in a leadership position, Governor Westmore is, like most of Hakeem Jeffries, a significant portion of black male leadership is within the Democratic Party. How do you think that criticism is fair that they are invisible to this party?
So first off, shout out to Governor Moore, amazing leader, friend and a mentor. So I appreciate that he and I are on the same page in terms of trying to sort of name what one of the challenges that we have to overcome. I hear that I've heard this from men of different ages, different walks of life that they feel invisible, and I understand it. It is absolutely reasonable to want to feel like politics is directly responsive to you and directly responsive to your community. Voting is as much of an individual act as it is a collective act. You want to feel like people are trying to get your vote specifically, not just your vote broadly. I think that is totally fair. And so I think that our responsibility as a team of Democrats, as a party, is to make sure that people feel that way. I had an old union guy tell me several years ago that people like to feel like they're getting campaigned to. And it's like that's real. And so our job through not only the policies that we talk about and the substance of them, but how we talk about them, where we talk about them, who talks about them. I think it's our job to go and bring that message to people. Like, it's not a voter's responsibility. I don't think this might be controversial. Not a voter's responsibility to like necessarily go in and have to dig up everything. Like, it's kind of my responsibility as a campaigner to go give you something or to go bring it to you. Like, we're this is a two-way street. And so I think, and how I focused, our efforts in Michigan is on really challenging the campaign, and they've responded to let's go out here and go into community and go to places again where people may not be accustomed to having political conversations, and let them know that even if they're not into politics, politics is happening to them every single day. And so we're going to meet again, like since this is about sports, like sporting events. Like, especially like these like community sporting events, high school sporting events, these baseball tournaments. My son plays soccer tournaments. Like these are places where people have opinions about life, and that's what politics is. How can we position people for success and to be their best and to have access to health and wealth and all those things? And so, I get why brothers say that, because they just want to feel every day like somebody is trying to earn their respect. And so, my job is to model what that looks like and what it feels like. And this campaign is getting better and better to what that looks like and what that feels like.
Well, you have great patience, because sometimes I do, and I'm glad you said 50-50 street, even though you are putting the responsibility more on the politicians to deliver the message. And I get that, and I understand that. But sometimes people act like somebody has to show up at their door. Like, it's millions of people in the country. Like you mentioned, there's 10 million people in Michigan. You can't knock on 10 million people's door. So what you gonna do? Not vote if they don't come to your door?
It's true, and Michelle Obama said that. Like, don't somebody shouldn't have to wait to ask you to do something. Like, just do
Exactly.
something. Look, I get that, but the reason where that comes from for me, though, Jemele, is like, it's hard to get somebody, like, being mad at somebody is not a strategy to get them to do something. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, for as frustrating as it may feel, man, why aren't you informed? Man, why aren't you engaged? Man, don't you know that that's wrong? Like, I understand that frustration, but ultimately, if I want you to be part of this process, I got to come get you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like there were kids on my AAU basketball team who weren't going to go to practice unless my coach went and picked them up. That kid was a great basketball player, but he'd have been at the crib if coach did not get in the van and go pick him up and bring him to practice. I keep that same energy in this process and saying that, you know what, we're going to do everything we can in our power to reach as many people as possible. Now, the other piece of that, though, is it's not necessarily a one-to-one thing. Like, there are brothers in the community who, if we are able to connect with them and when they get bought in, then they will get everybody else, or they will get a large number of people. Like, this always works like that. And so whether it is a leader in a family, in a community, in a neighborhood, like whatever it may be. So part of the campaign, but you can only do this if you know the community, is to understand, like, who are those people? And how can you really talk with them on a real level, ask them what's important to them, what they need, resource them appropriately so that then they can go and do the work and to reach people who I can never reach. Because for as accessible as I feel like I am, there are people who I'm not going to be able to reach as effectively as somebody else for any number of reasons. I don't know this dude. Look, I'm a West Side guy. He's from the East Side. I don't trust him. He has a suit on, like whatever. There could be all these reasons. He's too tall, like all these reasons, right? But there's somebody who that person would listen to and respect. And I'm not, arrogant enough to think that it's got to be me every time.
I mean, East Side ties aside, because I'm a West Sider. So
I know you are. That's why I keep saying.
I know. And for those who are listening, we have this nonsensical East Side West Side. I wouldn't call it a beef, but I'll give you this: us West Siders, we do act a little sedity, right? I'm like, we got school crab. Like, why are we acting like we're so much better than East Siders? You know what I mean? It's just like. Right. Come on now, like we know what it is. But along those same lines, I guess to make it plain, because I do feel like we do need to be reminded of the stakes. So, for black men who are voters and even those who are undecided, what would you say is at stake for them in this election?
Our economic potential is really at stake in this election. You know, we have seen in the last few years a huge acceleration in black folks starting businesses. I'm a two-time recovering entrepreneur myself. I talked about the two businesses that I started, you know, years back. I want black men's ideas to be invested in. And I think, and those ideas can result in businesses, they can result in whatever your, personal ambition may be, job-wise, et cetera. Because ultimately, this is about access to our dream of health and wealth. And at a time when we've seen health outcomes be there be such a wide disparity between the health outcomes for black men and other men, when we've seen a time where the disparities in economic outcomes for black men and other men be at an all-time high. Like, this election is yet another opportunity for us to take a step toward eliminating those disparities by making sure that folks can be invested in as entrepreneurs, as amazing teammates and employees, as fathers, as partners, as community leaders, and as healthy men. And I think that we have, frankly, one team who's interested in that, another team who isn't. And so we can get into the other sort of issue specifics there, whether it's the path to home ownership, which is the foundation of wealth of the American dream, and the $25,000 tax credit for that, the $50,000 tax credit for entrepreneurs that Vice President Kamala Harris has introduced. That is the result of conversations she's had during her years as vice president that led to this policy proposal with black entrepreneurs and black men in particular, entrepreneurs. So there's been things that have been the result of her relationship building in the community. But I think our health and our wealth is what's at stake, and our pathway to both of those. And so if folks want to get closer to that, if black men want to be healthier and wealthier going forward, we have a chance to take an action now to get closer to that. I'm not saying that voting for Kamala Harris means that you're going to be wealthy. I'm not saying that voting for Kamala Harris is going to overcome the fact that everybody on your mother's side of the family got diabetes. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that this is a person we can partner with to make sure that we can be healthier and wealthier as a person who is cynically talking to a few of us and then will disengage and forget about us immediately.
Now, there has only been, I think Wes Moore is the third black governor that
Yes.
We've had, right?
That was straight up elected. Yes.
That was straight up elected. Yes, correct. That's an important distinction. Are you aiming to be the fourth black governor that will be elected?
I appreciate that. Look, it's been amazing being the lieutenant governor of Michigan and serving everybody in the state of Michigan, and I'm excited about the notion of potentially carrying forward service at the state level. So I want to get through this election first before making any news on what that means. But just know that I think Michigan is ready for a different kind of leadership, and that can help everybody have access to a dream of health and wealth here in our state. And so, we'll talk more about that soon.
All right. Now, we're going to end this pod. Another thing I like to ask guests is what I call the messy question, because, I like to create a little controversy. Because what's the whole point of us doing this if I can't put the lieutenant governor in a headline? So this is the messy question for today's pod, which is, which one is your favorite, American or Lafayette, Coney Island, and the D? You got to pick one. Don't say both.
Listen, I'm not going to do that. I'm not a bad person. My favorite is Lafayette. However,
American people.
my children's favorite is American. So I do spend time over there.
So you didn't raise them right? What happened?
I do. So I spend time in American. The American leadership is fan, but like my personal favorite is Lafayette.
See, that's a real one. Now, for those who don't know what we're talking about, I'm sorry, New Yorkers, and I'm sorry, any other places. Detroit is the home of Coney Island, okay?
100%.
And we
100%.
have two of the most famous Coney Islands in Detroit, American and Lafayette. They're right next up to each other in downtown Detroit. They've been rivals for years. And I'm just gonna say real G's go to Lafayette. That's all I'm gonna say. Real G's. I like America. It's cool. But real G's go to Lafayette.